Jerry Reynolds is joining us here on the broadcast. Conversation already in progress. We were going over the mess that is happening in Brooklyn there during the commercial break. But now that we're back here in front of a radio audience who just loves you, Jerry, let's talk some Kings basketball a little bit and start with, I'm curious about this from your perspective. You've been a general manager, at least from your experience. You've been a general manager, you've been a coach. Obviously Kings fans are riding high off of Keegan Murray and everything that happened in Summer League. How much input do coaches have during that draft process?
Well, it varies a lot. I think a coach should have some input, but at the end of the day is coaches aren't really as prepared for the draft as the front office, and there can only be one decision maker. So I always thought during the years with Jeff Petrie and Rick Adelman, that was really a great team right there because they respected one another a lot. Jeff knew that Rick was going to coach whoever he got, and certainly Rick had opinions, but if Jeff decided to go another way, he was fully on board. So you have to. To me, it's a general manager needs to make those decisions. There's only one decision maker, and certainly you got big staffs, and everybody has an opinion. It's no different than I'd have opinion. Damien, you and James have it. We can all have different opinions, but at some point, there's one opinion that counts, and then you get on board with it. And I think that it does seem to me like that there's a good rapport and respect between Monte McNair and Mike Brown. I think, just from some of the late signings here to fill out the roster kind of shows you that, that maybe the thing's going in the right direction. That's I'm always trying to be an optimist, and I think there is some legitimate reason for some optimism.
Yeah.
Hey, Jer, I know you're a big fan of the Keegan Murray draft pick. What is it about Keegan Murray that stands out to you that you just thought this is a player I would draft, or this is what I would go with at this position?
Well, a couple of things, and I really didn't study the draft like you have, and I know I don't have near the information. Just a few times I watched him, and I really liked him because he can really make shots. He is a shot maker in a league that's really a value, and he's a late developer, and I always like late developers. From Tim Duncan to Akeem Olajuwon to Michael Jordan to Larry Bird, they were all late developers. They weren't the top 5 high school American stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They turned out pretty good. So I like that about Keegan, that he made great strides and, from first year to second year, and then certainly made great strides, I thought, in the summer league. So, a lot to like. And the one so-called analyst on ESPN that I like and trust, I'm not saying I dislike him, but Jay Billis, because I know he studies it. I've known him, and I really think he's a smart, on top of it guy. And I remember listening to him on the Scott Van Pelt show after the draft, and he said he thought that Keegan Murray was by far the most NBA ready of any player in this draft. And I thought, boy, if there's ever a team that needs an NBA ready player, it might be your beloved Sacramento Kings.
Jerry, you phrase that so funny, but I think there's so much value in it. And you say, I probably don't watch as much as you do, and I watched the guy play a couple of times and he could score. I honestly think when it comes to the draft, we overcomplicate things and we dive too far in. And we'd start talking about ceilings and star potential. And that's exactly what I did with Jaden Ivey. And I had people who had been around, Jaden Ivey his entire life. He's been around basketball since he was born. I had people telling me what a great kid he is, how motivated he's going to be. And I think there's some point during that process, you get bogged down with information. Whereas if you just take the Jerry Reynolds approach and turn on a basketball game and go, hey, that guy's pretty good right there, it really sometimes could be as simple as that.
Well, I do think you make a great point. I definitely think that's sometimes where mistakes are made is by outthinking yourself. Mm-hmm. I always recall, one of the ultimate screw-ups in Kings history was taking Thomas Robinson instead of Damian Lillard when the team was all set to draft Damian off of tremendous workout and great kid, great kid at that time. Everything was there, and Thomas Robinson was supposed to be the the second pick in the draft that year by all the mock drafts experts, blah blah blah, and so he starts to fall and pretty, can you pass this guy? This guy can this if it, certainly you got power forward needs, blah blah blah. Well, if you didn't, sometimes you just should go with what you know.
Mm-hmm.
I always say with the draft and the lottery, you don't have to get the best one. Just make sure you don't make get a bust or a mistake. I mean, in other words, maybe Chet Holmgren will never be an all-star, but if he's a really good player for 12 years, you're not going to regret that pick.
Yeah.
Every year there's somebody picked later. I mean, I wouldn't say that Benedict Mathurin might, he might turn out to be by far the best player this whole draft.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. You guys don't know. He doesn't know. But that's that's the history of the draft. That's why there's a Jokic that goes in the second round, and a Kawhi Leonard and Giannis Antetokounmpo 15 and 16, and Jimmy Butler 30. That's a reality of not only is a lottery in the pick that you get, it's a lottery after you pick.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Jerry, you've been on the other side of the table where you're making the pick. I mean, you even had a draft where you had 4 first-rounders. Mm-hmm. And when you're in that situation, how do you gauge best player available versus best fit? And where is it that you start to look at the break? Like where it's like, okay, I got Lionel Simmons at number 7. That's the best player available. But then when I get to 14, I got Travis Mays or 3 other players. I've got Dwayne Coswell and Anthony Bonner at 19 and 22. Like, where is it that you start to say, hey, I need to make sure that I'm getting the best player available, but then at some point I got to start filling some needs?
Well, I think, in that case, it was a total rebuild. So you're really looking for guys, honestly, just simply guys you think can have careers in the league. and in 3 of the cases, it turned out for where they were picked, they did. They were. I think Lionel was runner-up for Rookie of the Year. Coswell played 10, 12 years, and Bonner about 8 or 9 years, late picks. Travis Mays was a mistake, and I traded him after his first year for Spud Webb because and I think that's another thing that is not done enough is recognizing when you made a mistake and move off of it quicker. You can go back to some of the mistakes in recent years, whether it's been Nick Stauskas or Ben McLemore, Willie Cauley-Stein. All those guys probably, if you'd have made the decision, these aren't the guys. There were still some more value attached to them than when you finally did figure it out. Or it took too much longer to figure it out. And I think, seems to me that I've always thought the better franchises, are quicker to recognize their mistakes and move off of them. And everybody makes them, by the way. But the better franchises seem to, when they do, they don't say, "Well, we drafted him. We gotta keep him and develop him for 5 years, and then realize, oh, he's not very good."
Well, I mean, the 2003 WNBA draft was probably your finest moment as a general manager. I mean, that's just my personal opinion, but I think you executed a trade that day. That was certainly a game changer for that organization.
It was. I always thought getting Kara Lawson for Keidra Holland-Corn, who was also, I was very proud of that draft. She was a 3rd round pick,
mm-hmm.
and was a very good player, not as good as Kara. But to get Kara, I think she was a 3rd, 4th, 5th pick, whatever, in that draft, and we got her from Detroit. So that was maybe my 2nd best trade of all time. I would say probably the Mitch Richmond for Billy Owens trade would be number 1.
I'm a little biased. I would go
the
other.
You would be, and I understand, and I can't say you're even wrong, but I think the fact that Mitch also turned into Chris Webber on the way out.
Probably some value in that too. Yeah,
to me, that gives that move a little edge. You know what I'm saying?
You're listening to D-Lo and Casey along with James Ham and Jerry Reynolds here on KIFM West Sacramento, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, ESPN 1320, driven by Lasher's Elk Grove Dodge, always live on the free Odyssey app. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, Jerry, he brought up the WNBA. There's been murmurs. We don't want to fully report like what we've heard, but there's been some murmurs of a potential return of the Monarchs. What do you think that would mean? I mean, you're someone who was so in it at that point, and even at that point, like I know the stories behind the scenes that a lot of the Kings front office guys weren't big fans of the WNBA, but I think a lot of that's changed at this point. I think if there is more of an acceptance of the WNBA, and I think a lot of fans in Sacramento absolutely miss that franchise and having a second team in the building. What would it mean if the Monarchs were to come back?
Well, I think it'd be very well supported. It was, really, if you look at the attendance around the league today, it's went down as the league. But the Monarchs, what we averaged, an actual paid attendance would have been probably second in the league right now.
Right.
Now I think the problem is always comes back to finances, and so and I think I've always said the biggest issue I have with the WNBA, and I loved it, is that women need to be more involved in it. We've got a lot of billionaire women in America. They should be buying teams. And don't be expecting the NBA and men to do that. I mean, it's great if they do, but I just think it's one of those things. It's like, hey, this is a league for women, and certainly as men should they be able to enjoy it and be part of it. But I think the leaders of the league ought to be females in ownership and direction of franchises and everything. That's just my opinion.
Jerry, what do you? Because we often talk about you have sat through a lot of bad basketball over
yes,
the
I have. Yes, I
have. You and James both have sat through a lot of basketball. One thing that we constantly look for here, even with this particular team, is a leader. Like as a coach, what do you look for in a leader? Like, are you able to see one right away and go, yeah, that's the guy right there? Like, what are the qualities that you're looking for?
That's a great point and a great question. Yes, now the great leaders are easy to spot, just like great players. It doesn't take a lot of experience to spot LeBron James at 18 and say, boy, he's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're just ignorant. But having said that, I think, a leader, the great leaders of teams, they're easy to spot. But leadership in general, you'll see guys who are capable of it that probably need to be encouraged a little bit, given, basically access to do that. Now, the other part of it is they have to be a main player. You can't have Joe Fiducial at the bottom of the 10th man, 12th man being your leader. If that's the case, you've got no leader. That's like saying having your fourth assistant coach being your best coach. Well, if he is, you got more problems than you're going to solve. But having said that, I really believe, and here again, this is watching from afar, and you guys probably are closer to it. But I think Sabonis is the only guy who can be the leader on this team. I think he by his effort, his talent, is the fact that guys will want to play with him, and guess why they'll want to play with him? Because he's unselfish, unselfish, and to a fault maybe. But I think he's the guy. He's the guy. Now he's not. I mean, he certainly may not be your most talented player. You don't have to be the most talented. But it's like Vlade Divac was the leader back of the 2000 Kings.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's that's a big part of it. So, but you have to have somebody that the majority of players not only respects but understands that this guy's going to give us his best effort. He's unselfish. He's all about winning, and let's jump on board here. And I think that's where the Kings probably have a chance to make a jump, because I think they have that guy. Now, it'd be nicer if he was Giannis Antetokounmpo, but you can't have everything, right?
Very true. Jerry, as a guy who's been a head coach in the NBA and who's watched so many head coaches come and go, even when I go through and I start counting up how many head coaches there have been in Sacramento Kings history, it always gets a little murky because I think this Mike Brown is a 20th head coach, but that doesn't include you being the head coach like 17 times.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, 17 times I think it was. Yeah,
I think it was, yeah.
yeah.
But I guess when we talk about leadership, and even like you've seen the shift in the modern NBA to where the players are a much bigger personality than they used to be. How much can adding a Mike Brown in an offseason, a guy who's won, a guy who's got pedigree, a guy who just spent the last 6 years on the best dynasty that we've seen in a couple of decades in the Golden State Warriors, but what can he do to change what's happened here, and how can he do something different than just in my time than what Paul Westphal, Keith Smart, Michael Malone, Tyrone Corbin, George Karl, just keep going down the list. Dave Yeager, Luke Walton. What can he do differently?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I think he's coming in to his credit at the right time. He's got a roster. I don't think there's a bad guy on it. Some of those other coaches had some really bad guys to deal with that probably bordered on uncoachable, and that's tough for a coach to coach uncoachable people. And so I think that's a plus. Mike's had success as a head coach, and so that he's coming in with credibility. I do think it's so different in today's game, though, with head coaches. I mean, they've got so many assistant coaches. It's a real key to hiring staff and delegating responsibilities properly. It's like, say, I'm so old school. I remember, when you had one assistant, and I mean, the head coach basically worked with players. I know that's a strange concept, but you actually worked with them, taught them skills, spent time with them. And today it's, basically you've got all these developmental guys, and that's good. I mean, there's nothing bad about it except that, they've all got kind of like players. They've all got their own personalities, sometimes a little agenda. And so it's a real key to get the right guys. And I've really been impressed with how he's hired his staff, getting guys that he really feels comfortable with, as he should, to at the kind of the top spots with him. And so, that's where it stopped. I mean, you got to kind of, the old Bear Bryant statement. I always remember reading his book about near the end of his career and at Alabama as a football coach. And he said, I really don't coach players anymore. I coach coaches. He said, other than the quarterback and a couple other guys, I don't know who they are. And I mean, I think there's a lot more truth than we want to believe. Sure. and the NBA isn't to that level, but as I mean, that's a big part of it. You really got to get your staff on board and all pulling in the same direction. And so as a coach, you're getting credibility and get all your players on board as well as your staff. And it's certainly good things can happen. I thought, a good case in point, obviously, was Ime Udoka was terrific. Willie Green. I thought Chris Finch in Minnesota obviously changed things up there. You can. Taylor Jenkins in Memphis, I mean, marvelous job.
Yeah.
Those guys were able to change things rapidly.
Yeah.
And how did they do it? And I think it's a lot of what we just kind of talked about.
I think it was so strange, Jerry, too, that the knock on Mike Brown was, yeah, but what'd he do without LeBron? Or what'd he do without Kobe? Or like some of these coaches are looked down on because they coach superstars, as if coaching a superstar is easy. Like there's like I'm sure I'm sure they each come with their challenges, coaching a group of bad players and then coaching arguably two of the greatest players that ever lived. But there's still challenges that I thought Mike Brown was very, very, very good at.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that's a part that sometimes isn't fair. It used to be you got, I've always said it's like if my first job had been like Pat Riley's with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, James Worthy, I think I'd have done a lot better than I did. But I also say I don't think I could have had near the success Pat Riley. He was wired different. I mean, he sort of transfigured himself into becoming Pat Riley,
Mhm.
a different person. Well, I wouldn't have been able to do that or wanted to do that.
You
But
could slick your hair back, get you nice
I
and
could,
could
could
do
have
it.
done that. I don't think anybody had bought it for a second, but that's okay. I do think that with Mike, I think he's gotten an unfair rap there a little bit. I mean, what did he do with his teams? Well, he won games. Yeah, did he win as many as as somebody thought he should?
Mm.
And that's always the case. It's like. Uh, I mean, I always thought Kenny Atkinson at Brooklyn. What, did he win a lot of games? No, he probably won as many more than he probably should have, and that's how you're supposed to judge it. But I think, I think it goes both ways. Sometimes you don't win enough, so you're fired because they're bad. That's okay. That happens. And then now you get fired because they're good, but they're not good enough. You
Mm.
know, they're not going to be able to get the ring. It's like, yeah, last time I checked, 1 out of 30 will do that. No more. So everybody else is a failure, I guess. And I just don't buy that at all.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Jerry, when you look at the squad that they've put together for this season, it's deeper. It still has some holes, but do you think they're done? Would you like to see a couple more things? We talked about it earlier with the leadership thing, where your best, if your best leader is the 11th best person on your team. Well, I could say the same thing about defense. Like if your best defender is your seventh man or your sixth man, there's probably a problem. And do you think that they can still address some of their needs, including like a defensive presence?
Well, that may be the most important question. I mean, this roster I think is improved, but it's not a finished product. It's not going to contend for the upper echelon of the playoffs. I think, my own opinion is I know the Vegas has them at 31 or 2 games, early. I see them as potentially a 38 to 40 win team if Mike Brown has the impact I think he can. And I thought getting Kevin Herter and Monk were outstanding gets, for shooting, which they needed, and then Murray. But to your point, yeah, they could use. I mean, really, Davion is the only, in my mind, great defender, and I think he is great. I mean, I really do. I think, I don't think he's getting enough credit. People just automatically putting him as seventh, eighth man. I'm not sure I'd do that. Like you said, if you want to improve your defense, one of the ways is get the damn better defender out there. And I don't know about you guys, but I noticed at the end of the year, most teams were scheming against him, which tells you something. They're saying, like even a Steph Curry, they're getting him extra screens to get away from the little rascal. I mean, he's a pain in the ass. And so many of the Kings guys, no, they're not pains in the ass. They're very, very, very gentle folk. So that'd be, I know I'm old school, but I'd find a way to figure out a way to get Davian out there 30 something minutes every night. I don't care whether he start. I care less, but he's going to be out there because he could set the tone defensively.
I feel like he could be a leader. When we were talking about leaders earlier, I feel like he could be that guy.
Agree with you there. Just go back quick, and I'll say one thing.
Yeah.
He was the best player on a national champion and the leader of a national champion. Mm-hmm. Name all the guys on the current roster that you said about. We're done. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. You're the best, man. It's been great catching up with you. Thank you for spending so much time with us today. We really
my pleasure. Anytime, guys. You guys are. I enjoy your show. I really a lot. Really do. And of course, I always say I learned a lot just right down there with James for a couple of years and trying to get excited about the pre and post game show, which I failed miserably in that attempt, by the way.
Understandable. And I can tell you that means a lot to me, Kenny, and Jesse in the studio as well.
And what's Kenny doing on vacation? My God, he's been with you. Damien, it's a vacation when he's working with you.
Well, to be fair, it's his birthday.
Oh, okay. Right.
So he's off celebrating in Las Vegas. His son has a tournament out there as well. So he's earned the day off. Thankfully, I have Ham here to carry the show. And you.
Yeah, you got to go in there with you, no question.
I'm lucky. That's Jerry.